1, 2. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Williams, and I'm on the Berklee faculty in the guitar department, and it is my pleasure to announce Mark White in a second. Mark's a multifaceted musician, artist, composer. He's very widely respected at the school. He's been traveling over the years, performing with many of the highest level jazz groups. He's played with the George Russell Living Time Orchestra, with Gil Evans, with Herb Pomeroy, with the Boston Pops, many other groups that are too numerous to even mention here. He's traveled internationally with the school on many occasions, more than 50 trips, domestic and international, as a teacher and a performer with the school. And this group is an all-star group that he has with him also. I'll let him tell you about them a little bit later. But Berklee is very privileged to have Mark on the faculty. He's an astounding player with a tremendous amount of knowledge to share with students. And it is my pleasure to announce, please put your hands together for Mr. Mark White.
Yeah. Thanks, Blank.
You got it, bud.
All right. Here we go. Hi, thanks very much. Glad to have you guys with us today. We got a terrific crew of guys up on the stage today, And I'd like to know who you're listening to, or let you know who you're listening to. First of all, on tenor saxophone, Mr. Arnie Krakowski. Ben Whiting on the baritone, a Berklee alumni, as well as Arnie, actually. Another Berklee alumni and current faculty member, Jeff Stout, on trumpet. Another Berklee alum and trombonist, John Garnis. In the rhythm section behind me, we have Scott Diogburn on piano, ear training department, etc. Mundo. And another Berklee faculty member on the bass, Mark Poniatowski. And a legend around these parts that runs one of the great big bands that actually all of us that are on stage have had the pleasure to play with for about 35 years, Mr. Kenny Hadley on drums. Yeah, so we just wanted to do a little short opener to, give you a taste of this music, which we're playing a book of pieces by the Dave Pell Octet, which was a group that was very active in the 1950s. They were one of the leading instrumental record sales champions in the jazz world back in the 1950s. They were a West Coast group, and they had some of the very best arrangers on the West Coast. That was arranged by Marty Page, that first tune, Susie Blues. This next one is a Bob Florence arrangement. It's an original by a pianist named Pete Jolly, who was also very well known on the West Coast in the 1950s and 60s. We're going to play it for you, then we're going to talk a little bit about being able to locate some of these ideas on the guitar and being able to phrase and blend with the horn section. So first, Little Bird, and then we'll talk a bit. Yeah, they could have kept going for a long time, huh, man? Yeah, absolutely. We're really glad to have you guys with us this afternoon, and it's actually been a pleasure working with a lot of you all this past week for the Guitar Summer Sessions. I think this was a really good crew of guitar players. And what we want to address a little bit in this clinic is some ways to be able to start to read and be able to organize some of these sounds that we're working with here in these charts. So there's no tablature here. There's no chord grids, no hieroglyphics, as I like to call them. You have to start reading a little bit, and especially at a music school like Berklee, it's very important to be musically illiterate because you need to be a part of ensembles, ear training classes that read music, and it's the language that all instrumentalists share. So we guitar players tend to learn a lot by YouTube, and we learn a lot by following by example with tabs and using the chord grids and all that, which is fine. It's a good place to be able to start. We all did it. There's nothing wrong with it. But the first step to being able to get some success with reading together is being able to locate where the idea is on the guitar. And when you're playing with horns, there's a few ideas that I'd like to share with you in terms of some thoughts that you might think that they would actually, be kind of obvious. But one of the first ones is being able to breathe when you're playing with the horns, because guitar players and pianists tend to just, play wherever they feel like the time would be. And with a horn group, you're working with guys that are been, from the very earliest development, been reading and working with ensembles to be able to get jazz phrase, and they're playing instruments that you breathe into. It's always a good idea to be able to take a breath with a horn before you start an ensemble idea, because you'll actually come in together. And I learned that trick a long time ago with a great percussionist in the Boston Symphony Orchestra. I was playing with the Pops at the time, and this guy was a timpanist. And he told me that, you could match the phrase better by breathing when you're doing the stuff with the reeds. And it indeed was really true. So that would be something you might take, as just being kind of obvious, but a lot of people forget to do it. Suck air before you come in an ensemble, because it really makes a gigantic difference in how you connect with the rest of the group. So the breathing thing like a horn is actually kind of a difficult thing that guitarists have been trying to do for about 50 years now. The first really big star of the electric guitar was a guy named Charlie Christian that played with the Benny Goodman group circa 1938 through 1940. He died very young of tuberculosis, which was pretty rampant disease back then. And the thing that was really interesting about him is he was emulating one of the star tenor players of the day named Lester Young. So everything that he was trying to do was trying to get that phrase happening like the way that Lester played it. And then when Wes Montgomery came along, he learned how to play guitar by actually copying the solos of Charlie Christian. And Charlie Christian had in turn been influenced by Lester Young. Wes Montgomery started out that way and got that same phrase by discovering how to locate ideas on the guitar. And then he went a step further. And he was really the first great guitar player to be able to get the vibe of not only just Lester Young, but Charlie Parker on the guitar. And if you listen to some of Wes's recordings that are done in the late 50s with his brothers, the Master Sounds group, you'll really hear him reaching for that Charlie Parker language. So, in addition to being able to breathe, there's locational things about how to help you be able to organize where to play these things on the guitar. So I just want to give you a couple ideas about this stuff. I also have some music up here that you guys can grab to be able to look at the next couple tunes, but I'd like to just talk about Little Bird for a moment. And what I got to do is try to rig this microphone so I can talk and play at the same time. Can we do that? All right, cool. I'm going to let you do it. All right. That works pretty good. Thank you so much. So, you know, as you're listening to Little Bird, you're actually in the key of A minor. And you hear that it's working for like 2 bars. So it goes between A minor and G minor. Now, not only would you be able to read some of the ensemble material in here, playing from the shape of those chords, but you can also improvise with it. So if I take an A minor and I outline the chord and I add chromatics to it, to G minor. That's going back and forth between the outlines of A minor and G minor. We add a little bit of chromatic to it. Maybe an ornament or two. But the location is actually coming from the chord shape. So those of you that are just starting to do some reading and being able to get this kind of language together on the guitar, especially in jazz territory, you know, a lot of teachers will start their students out playing out of scale shapes. You know, so they're trying to read little passages that come out of a scale, that's an okay way to start. But I find that with jazz guys, you'll actually be able to get closer to, you know, good solo ideas by playing the chord tones. And that's what we're doing here. So as you're playing with the rhythm section, when the piano and the bass and drums are comping, the drums are establishing a groove and the time, of course, though actually everyone is always doing that together. You know, it's not the drummer's responsibility to play time, it's everybody's responsibility to play time. The bass player is outlining the chord progression, maybe with a root and a fifth and a Latin feel. The piano player or guitar player, if you're comping, might be doing something that comes off the chord. And when you put that together, you get the rhythm section. So if I could ask Mark and Scott and Kenny just play a little groove on those 2 chords, listen to what's happening so that you can identify one chord to the next. A minor to G minor, 2 bars each. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and. Excellent, thank you. So, by the way, too, could I get a little bit more guitar in this monitor up front? That'd be great, thank you, because I'm spanking it a little bit. So, we're just playing basic chord outlines. That's excellent, thank you. You can make millions of lines out of that. And some of the great bebop guitar players, including Joe Pass and, you know, so many other guys have actually used a lot of the chord shape to be able to get the location of where you're going to play some of the content. So as I look at some of the ensemble that we just played, look at where it lays. You see it coming directly out of the chord shape. If you want to play it, more positionally, you can do that because there are, in addition to the A minor, there's like a G minor shape that's right here. So we can use that and not have to move around so much. But I think it's a really good idea to be able to follow the chord shape when you play. It helps a lot, and it'll give you some foundation to be able to relate to what the rhythm section is doing. Help you be able to follow the chord so you understand how the progression's working. Add the other things like chromaticism, passing scale notes, substitute chords, whatever it might be. But the foundation thing is actually really following the chord a lot. So that's a great place to be able to start. If you're trying to get jazz and fusion music together, that's one of the biggest problems for most young players. Where do you put your fingers? How do you organize it? Okay? The wind's blowing in. And just a couple other thoughts while we're stopped for a minute is conditioning your instrument, being able to play in tune, not just, the instrument itself, like tuning with an electric tuner or something, but setting the intonation correctly, using, fairly fresh strings when you're trying to be able to keep your pitch in good shape, because all these horn players on stage definitely pride themselves on the pitch that they can play with. They know how to be able to balance and blend and tune with any ensemble that they do, from a small group to a big band. These guys are really exceptional. So you don't want to just be like, well, what's the last time you changed your strings? Well, when the last one broke, I changed it. Yeah, man. You gotta be able to change them frequently, because guitar strings, especially the plain upper strings, tend to have metal fatigue. And as they fatigue metal-wise, the pitch tends to go flat. So the acid test is actually being able to check, like on an archtop guitar, if you have a carved bridge, to be able to find the 19th fret and play the harmonic with the fretted note. And you want to be able to do that on all the pitch, all the different strings. That's kind of the acid test of being able to get your guitar in tune. Really important working with a horn group, because if you can get all the other ingredients together, you don't want to fall short because your instrument is not playing in tune. It just makes it very difficult for the ensemble. And when you're recording, it's particularly crucial. And I think that, nowadays we're all using like Melodyne when we're recording, and you can bump the note up, down, or a little bit. But it was always a point of pride, with a good guitar player, to be able to play in tune on a recording and play in tune with an ensemble. It's a very important little thing, so I'm just going to put that in there. And with that, I'm going to move along a little bit here. So there's some music that you can grab at the front of the stage if you didn't get it already. It's a chart on a great old tune called Let's Face the Music and Dance. So did you guys get that yet, or can we pass it out a little bit? So I'll just take a minute, pass it out a little bit. There's a couple of different pieces in there. There's Let's Face the Music, which we're going to play now, and also another one called By the River Sainte Marie. So I'll just give you a second to get going, Amy. All right. So everybody get a copy? I'm sure that there's probably enough to go around here. Thanks for the guys helping pass it out, appreciate that. So I scribbled out a couple of fingerings really quickly that I might use, and I'm just gonna talk a moment about this because, you know, I think we'd be better off playing so you get some more ideas about this. As far as the fingerings go, we look for not only chord shapes and harmonic progression to be able to find a place to locate the notes, but scale fragments, intervallic fragments, any kind of thing like a triad shape or an outline of a chord is a good place to be able to start putting your fingering ideas together. You don't necessarily want to play these things just in a key because they're in C minor or D flat minor or whatever. You need to be able to find, you know, where the essence of the music is coming from. It helps to be able to make things more natural in terms of the phrasing, location of your ideas. And the other thing that I want to branch out into a little bit, to be able to get closer to a horn phrase on the guitar, you need to play down the length of the string a little bit. So, you know, this covers a lot of really important things, improvisation-wise, but also reading-wise. So, for instance, like when we play an outline into like a minor 7 chord, and I have those, you know, basic chord tones, I'm going to play chromatic notes into those laterally from side to side. So I have the shape of the chord. I can actually, you know, see some kind of triad or 7th chord. And I can play 1 octave. I can play a triad in 2 octaves. I can do it as 7th chord in 2 octaves, whatever you want to do. But the other passing notes move into the chord tones side to side. So if I do 2 notes below the 3rd of a G minor chord, I'll move. So what I'm trying to do is be able to follow the shape of the chord while I'm playing these chromaticisms laterally into the shape of that. So for instance, you can combine multiple chromatics together, and I might have something like this. To the 3rd of the chord, to the 5th of the chord, to the root, next octave. It's an interesting way of being able to do stuff because a lot of guys get caught in finger stretches and they're trying to be able to realize the chromatics, like stretching very awkwardly in weird ways that you can't see the chord anymore. It really helps a lot to be able to do this, and this is a nice example of something that you guys could take a look at tonight, you know, after the fact, and see how you might play some of this stuff on the guitar. What I'm going to do here is mainly play ensemble, so I'm not playing, you know, any solos on this particular one. I'm just going to be able to play along with the horns, and what I'm going to try to do is, first of all, blend in tune, but I'm also going to pick the locations for where I play the notes relative to who I'm playing with. And a lot of this particular chart for guitar is with the trombone frequently. I also have the melody down an octave sometimes, so I have to be able to blend that. And we can apply that same thing that we just did with the chromatics that move into the scale tones laterally. We can actually play lines that could be scales or whatever that move down a string. And I try to get as much of that happening as I can because that helps you to be able to get more of the essence of the horn phrase. And that's what we're trying to do. So, enough yakking. Let's play Face the Music and Dance. Thanks, guys. That's actually a really cool piece of music. Goes back a long time. And I was, basically I'm reading this. I might change a couple of fingerings for what I wrote out for you, but playing it pretty true to what's probably on there. And some of the things that I'm looking for, if I find a fragment of a minor scale, then I'll play, out of that kind of scale shape. So if you see something like a kind of harmonic minor, that kind of sound is encompassed in that shape. You might use that scale to be able to render some of it, but I may not go on too far with it. When I'm doing these longer sustained notes that are like at bar 25, I'm going to try to play them as long as I can, because there's a legato phrasing mark over it, which means that those notes are to be played long and connected. So you don't want to break up the phrase, and one of the ways that you can do that is play a longer length on the string. So that really helps right away to be able to get a smoother connection with the rest of the horns when you're doing this. And in general, you're going to start to find this for jazz soloing or ensemble playing when you're playing with horns, that you need to be able to move up string length a little bit more to get that kind of vibe, that feel. So, for instance, when you play a C major scale and you play it in thirds, it's very different than if you phrase it up two strings. It right away starts getting a little bit of an accent that's more like the way that Arnie might play a line on tenor. Those little breaks actually make just a little bit of a staccato vibe to what you're doing, and it gets closer to that horn thing. And when you put that together with the breathing, you get a really good combination of stuff. So experiment with being able to get the phrasing over longer lengths of string to be able to match with horns. You don't have to go too crazy. I mean, we're going to move around every once in a while for convenience sake, to be able to make something sensible. Because if you have to jump too far in terms of where you're playing, that can get a little difficult to control when you're reading. Okay. So that was just a couple of thoughts on that one. And I'd like to move on to the other piece that you have in your packet. This is a Harry Warren tune that is actually quite old, and it was arranged by a guy that you might have heard of named John Williams, of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, conductor with the Pops, and also the writer for many film scores, including Star Wars and E.T. and a million other different things. That's the same John Williams. And in the early days on the left coast, he went by the name Johnny Williams. And you'll sometimes see that tag on various things that he did. He was an active jazz piano player and was really busy in the jazz scene, but he was equally busy in the studio and as a film scorer and writing music for shows like Lost in Space and other things you might have heard of. So this one is a great one to be able to check out for articulations with horns. And that's the next thing that you have to work with. Being able to, in addition, find locations to be able to make the phrasing imitate and sound like a horn player, but also to be able to put the accents and certain things that horn players do when they play jazz. So I think that we should probably play the music. You can follow the guitar part in your packet and see what's going on. I didn't put any fingerings on this one. just because I find that when I read these things, I change up things constantly. But I am looking for, little scale fragments. I'm looking for chord shapes. I'm looking for intervallic shapes. And that intervallic thing is actually a very useful tool on the guitar. When you're trying to be able to find a location to, render an idea, certain interval shapes like an octave are a great way of being able to zone in to how you might play a line, because everything might fit around that. It's right there, and you can use that as a reference to be able to help find locations for what you do. Other guitar signature things are like the shape of a 6. So if you were playing something like the intro to Soul Man, you would definitely want to be able to play the shape of that major 6 sound, because it's really easy to be able to follow, and then we move that up the fingerboard, up the string, to get a location. So just some different ideas. We'll talk a little bit more about articulation things, but let's check out on the River St. Marie. Thanks, guys. Small but select crowd. Yeah, man. So there's some interesting things that are happening with, what the horns are doing in terms of how they play the notes. For instance, you'll frequently find a rhythm in jazz, and it's all through this piece. That's an eighth note and a quarter note and an eighth note. We always play the middle note short. Dee-da, bo-dee-da, bo-dee-da, ba. Za-da, do-dee-da, do-dee-da, da. Not zee-da, do-dee-da, do-dee-da, unless it's got a long marking in it. It's something that jazz musicians do automatically. And this is the other part too. In addition to the location of where you're playing the ideas and how you're phrasing it on certain strings, location-wise, you have to be able to follow the accents and articulation marks. In this chart, as you can see, we have short notes, accents, maybe a long tone here and there. And these help us to be able, as a group, to be able to get the feel of what the music is trying to accomplish in a speaking sort of way. You realize that, when we talk to each other, we're constantly using accents and different kind of inflections to be able to create, whether we're making a statement or whether we're actually asking a question, to be able to convey emotion. And it's the same sort of thing. When you're reading music, you're trying to speak and you're trying to make the group work with the same articulations. So we all know, when you check your bank account with the robot teller or something, and it says you have $12.56 in your account, that it's not human, right? When you're trying to be able to get good flow, when you're asking a question, you might make a rise at the end of your sentence and say, "What, are you kidding me?" Or if you're particularly mad at something, you're not going to, unless you're trying to do the Dirty Harry, Clint Eastwood type of thing, like, "Are you feeling lucky, punk? Did I have 5 shots or did I use all 6 in that clip? Are you feeling lucky?" I mean, the guy's so mad you can just see him bristling, right? But he's not like one of these bellicose guys that's yelling and screaming at the top of his lungs. It's a real subtle type of thing. And music has those same kind of inflections in it. So as a group, we're trying to be able to get that stuff together. So I want you to just pay attention. I'm going to ask the group to play it from bar 45 to the end. That's right after the guitar solo that was in there. And we're going to play it to the end. Check out, what you see with those markings, like a long note is with a dash over it. That means that we're going to hold that note for full duration. A staccato marking is a dot, and that is just going to be a short note. You're not going to give it the full duration. Okay? An accent, which is V. I'm sorry, is that 95? 95. We're looking at 95, guys. The eyes aren't what they used to be. Just ask the amazing Mandrake. If you take a look at what we're doing, you're going to hear subtle little shifts in the way that we phrase it, according to accents. So we're going to play, just the last portion of the tune. Listen for when you see things being written long and short, and where the accents are and how that works with the whole group. Same tempo? We're not just going zap up beep ba 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 beep 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 ba. It's got vitality. Be dot sa da 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 ba do be sa da ba do li di ba boo ba da ba do be. It's just the same way that you would, speak to another person that you're glad to see and say, "Hey, Joe, how you doing, man? Good to see you. It hasn't been a couple weeks, has it? No, I can't believe it. 2 weeks." You use that articulation to be able to bring it out. Or if you're telling a joke, you're going to be able to accentuate certain things to be able to get the point across with the little tale that you're telling. So that actually goes right into the music. Same type of thing. Speak when you're playing. I hear a voice from the past. Okay. Scott says, why don't you guys just play a few bars without the rhythm section and listen to how we're trying to blend with the horn? Same place. Let's do the same place. Just give us a little bit of hi-hat time there, Pops, would you? Okay, so we're going to start at the same place that we just did and listen to the group together. All righty? So about the same thing? 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Trying to get as close to their phrase as I possibly can. And that can be a little bit difficult, especially, if you can't hear yourself too well and you're kind of over picking the guitar, which I feel like I'm doing a little bit today. So apologize for that. But see, these guys are such great horn artists that to be able to play with them is always an education for me. You have to be able to learn how to educate yourself by listening. And if you're lucky enough to get the experience to be able to play with professionals like these guys, you are indeed very fortunate. And it has been my good fortune to be able to do this with a long time. These guys in a lot of different situations all over the planet, traveling in Europe and the Far East and all over South America, working with all these guys doing a lot of stuff. And the more you play, the better things get. So one thing I would advise you guys to be able to get into is look for situations to be able to make the guitar a horn in a group if you can. Be able to learn the phrase in the way that these guys play. See if your stage band or jazz group that you play in a high school back home has, a guitar seat in it, instead of just sitting there and chunking out the chords. A lot of guys always get relegated to the chord seat. And that's cool if you're doing stuff like Freddie Green, because what he was doing on the guitar was absolutely extraordinary. But a lot of, band directors just kind of relegate, the guitar to that chore because they don't know what to do with them. So they sit there playing, chords that sometimes don't always blend with the vibe of what they're doing. They need to learn how to reduce chords when they're playing like a Freddie Green style, or enhance them and embellish them when you're doing comping for solos. But I would really recommend try to get into the line. See if you can double like a tenor saxophone part. Or if you're short a trombone in your ensemble, the guitar is really a great instrument to be able to cover a trombone part. But you have to breathe, and you have to be able to pick locations and phrase with the guys. So look for these opportunities to be able to play, because the guitar gets really exciting. For me personally, I was very fortunate when I came up to school here at NEC that I started working with a great arranger-composer named George Russell. And George Russell was one of the very early guys that was writing for guitar like a horn. And that's what's happening with this group. The Pell charts actually are playing alto parts on the guitar. Very rarely are we doing anything with chords. It's all about being able to play the line like a horn. And George Russell was doing that stuff way back when. There's some great albums of George with players like Howie Cusick and Bill Evans, the wonderful piano player, along with Max Roach, John Coltrane, Art Farmer, and a cast of jazz luminaries, and Barry Galbraith, this amazing guitar player that was able to really get it right. I mean, not only was he a terrific reader, but he was just a wonderful musician. Everything that he put his fingers to turned to gold. And he was one of the main studio guys in New York from probably about 1955 to about 1965. I started having some health problems at that point and got a little bit more into teaching. But that guy was doing triple and quadruple sessions at triple scale every day. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that kind of killed him, is that he was smoking cigarettes all the time. And if you see a picture of Barry in the studio doing one of those dates, you'll see a gigantic platter of cigarette butts. All unfiltered Chesterfields. Nasty stuff. So if you guys are smoking, stop now, because it's no good for you. This is a public servant's announcement from the Berklee College of Music. Come on, guys, lighten up. I know, this is too serious, man. I'm trying not to be too serious up here because, you know, I like to have fun when I play music, and I like to have fun when I teach, and I like people to be involved, you know, and I hate it that you guys are all sitting so far away. I wish that you were right up here on the stage with us, you know, because I like being able to see the whites of your eyes, you know, real nice and close, you know, so that we can get, you know, like a little rapport happening. But of course, the hip guys always sit in the back of the room, right, man? So there they are, the hipsters all the way in the back. I think those are people. I can't tell for sure. Well, whatever, man. You got to have some hipsters, too. But, you know, music should be fun. And when we play with these guys, I mean, you know, you really have to be able to cut your part. If you can't read this stuff, you are in trouble with a capital T. And not only that, you know, you want to be able to add to the process of making good music. We always have a good time. And it's all about, you know, camaraderie and watching out for each other. When we travel, we do the same thing, and when we're on the stage, we do the same thing. So, you know, I hope that you're not looking at this like this evil lecturer up here, you know, giving you all this stuff, man. Because it's pretty serious stuff. And, you know, guitar players, they don't like reading so much anyway. But it's okay. I try to keep convincing people to do it. But it's okay. I keep on getting called for the gigs that the other people can't read. So, I mean, it works good too, man. But I would like to see, you know, some more of you guys be able to get the gigs, because I'm getting kind of old now. You know, so it's like the eyes aren't what they used to be. And we need some fresh boots, you know, like on the soil over here. And we need guitar players that can read and take a proactive stance musically and not be relegated to chunking chords in the back of some band. Man, come on. Get out there and do your thing, man. You know, play some bop. Play some heads, man. Learn how to be able to do it. You know, get that virtuosic thing together. Learn how to be able to solo. And in the end, what you do when you solo is actually comprising the same elements that you use when you read. So just as a little parting shot, I want to make sure that you guys get it invested in this stuff. There's all kinds of great material that you can use for reading. Like I'm frequently asked by students, like, well, what should I try to read to get my reading improved? And my answer is always start simply, but start like at your public library. You know, you can go down to the Boston Public Library or the Berklee Media Center or New England Conservatory Library or a Brookline Library, Cambridge, you pick it. They have a music section. And there's a lot of excerpts from orchestral stuff. There's duets for 2 flutes and 2 clarinets and 3 oboes or whatever. And you can get together with another guy and practice your reading, because misery loves company. No, I mean, actually, you know, when you play together, it'll enforce you to be able to try to get your reading together a little bit more. So I think it's a great thing to do a buddy system, you know, because guitar players are resistant to reading. And unfortunately, a lot of us teachers sometimes pass on some kind of drecky stuff for the students to be able to read. You know, so I've always kind of thought about a guy that, you know, I send home and he's transcribing a Stevie Ray Vaughan solo and he's really into this music, this vibrant, energy-filled stuff. And then, oh, it's 11 o'clock. I better do some sight reading, right, man? So he gets out his book and starts reading something that's not too exciting to play, shall we say, and we won't say any more than that. So what do? They play for about 1 minute, and then before you know it, they're going, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be reading. Not too exciting. Back to this. That's why guitar players never get their reading together, because they get this boring stuff and then they don't do it, and you wonder why they don't do it. Because it sucks. They don't like it, they don't want to do it, and they won't do it. So here's what I suggest. Find some classical music, and even though it might not be your bag, there's a lot of great energy in that music, in the music of Mozart and Beethoven and Schubert. And, you know, a lot of rock guys like Yngwie Malmsteen, the Shredders and stuff, you know, they play neoclassical styles. And you find the same kind of stuff that you would find in a Paganini composition. You know, you might find that in an Yngwie tune. So it's like you can transfer that. They're a lot more fun. And I personally really like Bach chorales. I wrote a book a long time ago where I arranged like 14 of them to correspond to the semester that we do. And I think that it's really fun for guys to do because everybody has, you know, recording devices. You know, you got computers and you got computer interfaces that you can plug a guitar into. Just put a click track down, so you got a quarter, and do the fourth part, and do the third part, and do the second part and the first part. And then mix it and give it to your grandmother for Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever pagan holidays you like to celebrate. And they'll love it, man. They really love getting that stuff. Plus, it sounds really good, you know? So, I mean, it'll be a project that you'll follow through on, and it's a really great way to start improving your reading. So, I hope that you'll make a trip down to the old public library or the used bookstore, and you'll find, you know, some duet books. Get together with a friend and read. Get into a situation where you transcribe horn stuff so that you can play it when you play with a band at school. You know, definitely get proactive with that stuff and tell the band director that, yeah, you can cover that trumpet part, man. Learn from the other guys in the band, and you'll never be sorry, and you'll never look back. Once you start, you really get cooking. And speaking of starting, you guys have been really great, you know, while I've been dispensing this information. I really appreciate you guys being here. It's late in the afternoon. You had a long day. You got ensemble concerts going on tomorrow, yada, yada, yada. You know, you could be out having an iced tea across the street in the newly refurbished Starbucks. So we got one more piece that we're going to play for you today. It's called Jazz Goes to Siwash. It's a Bill Holman arrangement. And it's been our pleasure playing with you today. I hope you got a couple ideas that you might try to get into a situation like this, because playing with these guys for me is a real joy. And I want you to experience the same thing of working with deeply dedicated individuals that are monster musicians. They're great company. you can never go wrong. So thanks again for being here. Jazz goes to Cy Wash. Thanks very much. Nice to have you with us today. Have a great night. Thank you.